If you have voiceover needs or want someone to edit and produce your podcast, call Rich Masotti at 914-355-1759.
I'm Stephanie Filardi. Welcome to Mind the Gap, the podcast. I believe many people fall short of living the life of their dreams simply because they get stuck in what I call the gap. The vision behind this podcast is to help you understand how to navigate the gap and in the process, awaken to the life that is waiting for you. It starts now. Let's go.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. Wow. I have to be honest, it was not easy to record this podcast with everything that's going on. There were moments when I felt like perhaps I didn't have anything to say that would be a positive contribution. And then I realized, wait a second, that actually is the intention of this podcast, is to help us navigate the gap. And yours truly is certainly in that gap right now. So my intention today is to bring you a guest, Rich Masotti, who's actually the producer and editor of this fine podcast. And we will be talking candidly about what's going on right now in the world. And really, what does it mean to be in the gap? And what can we do to navigate it successfully? So I trust it's going to be an eye-opening, real, honest, helpful, and supportive conversation for you today. Let's begin by centering ourselves. We all need it. So today we will be taking 6 conscious breaths. We're just doubling it up. So when you're ready, inhale, filling up. Exhale, let it go out of your mouth. Inhale, filling belly, ribs, and chest. Exhale, let it all go. Inhale, filling belly, ribs, chest. Exhale, slow release, let it all out. Inhale, filling belly, ribs, and chest. Exhale, letting go from the chest, ribs, belly. Inhale, filling up. Exhale, slow, sweet. Release, let it go. And then one more time, take your time as you feel the belly, the ribs, and the chest. Exhale, let it go. And then taking a moment to notice how you feel. Maybe you feel a little calmer, a little bit more centered. So this is the time to actually spend more time breathing. And what often happens when we're in situations like these, where there's a lot of fear and uncertainty and very rapid change, often those are the times when we find it hard to sit still and breathe. I understand. And it's also the exact time where we must do that, because if we don't, we'll continue to get caught up in what's going on and we'll feel everything even more. So these moments of breathing breaks, of listening to the podcast, of doing things that allow you to slow everything down are critical. So I'd like to introduce you to Rich Masotti. He's going to be sharing with us today some stuff about his life. Welcome.
Hi, Stephanie. It's a pleasure to be here on the other side of the camera, so to speak.
It's very cool. I'm just going to let you introduce yourself, my friend. So tell the world who you are. Well, who you are today.
Who I am today.
What do you want people to know?
Well, that's such a loaded question. I'm still very much working on defining who I am for myself, let alone the rest of the world. It really, I've always wanted to figure out who I was supposed to be for the world, but it's more important that I figure out who I'm supposed to be for me. Today, I am a float therapy center host on furlough or in self-quarantine, wearing my onesie and working on our podcasts. It's definitely an interesting time to be alive.
Well said.
Alive being the key.
Exactly. And choosing to continue to be alive. Like I said the other day on social media, we get to choose in these moments when there's so much fear and this mindset of lack and scarcity. It's so easy at these times. It's really easy to kind of fall into that rabbit hole of the darkness and the scarcity and the lack mindset. So it's important to remember that when you say I'm alive, that you're choosing to be alive. And when we choose to be alive, we choose to come from that place of love and abundance and prosperity. So tell us a little bit about, if you will, you mentioned you're on furlough from your job, as many of us are. And what has it been like for you? What's happening? What are you noticing? How are you dealing with it? Right? Because this podcast is really about navigating the gap. And all of us right now, every single one of us are in the gap to some degree right now because of everything that's going on with this coronavirus. So I would love for you to share a little bit about it. What is it like for you?
Well, I'm only home 2 days so far. And the first thing that comes to mind is that I am dealing with all of this by not dealing with it the way I would have dealt with it 5 years ago. And, at first blush, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but a lot has changed in my life in the last 5 years. And the most important thing I've already noticed is that I'm not the guy I was 5 years ago who would have been taking a completely different position on this whole thing. I am grateful to be home, grateful to be following the directions and suggestions of our communities, more than willing to oblige in an effort to flatten the curve, as they say, and try to minimize exposure to this virus. So while I'm not home very long yet, and certainly not bored, I am present, I am comfortable, I am grateful, I am blessed, and I hope to use this time in a creative way and to hopefully be of service to someone somehow.
Well said. That's inspiring to hear that you are. And I'm curious and you don't have to share details of how you would have behaved 5 years ago. I'm more, and you can, if you feel like it would be helpful for the listeners. What I'm most interested in is what shifted, right? Because when we talk about transformation and we talk about navigating the gap, in order to come through something, right? Usually we have ways of being that shift by our choice, by our conscious choice. So do you want to share a little bit more about what that was, what that is, what you noticed?
That's a great question. I consider myself very fortunate to be aware of spirituality and aware of my own spirituality. These aren't even adequate words for it, right? Spirituality is a big concept. Some people don't understand it. I don't feel like I did a whole lot. I don't feel like there was a shift I am responsible for or can take credit for. What I can tell you is I needed help 5 years ago, something in the universe shifted for me. I sought the help, and as a result, who I am, where I am, what I'm doing is all completely different now. Now, that's fluffy, right? That's nice. It's easy for me to say, right? No, we are who we are. I didn't know who I was. I sought help when I needed it. I don't know why. I give that credit to the universe and to something I refer to as God. From there, surrendering to that help and committing to taking suggestions on a daily basis, eventually just took me over. There was the shift. A willingness to participate, to listen, to show up, and eventually that process, that help, took me. I didn't take it. It took me.
Well said. So it sounds like, even though I hear what you're saying it wasn't me, and yet maybe it was there was a co-creation, right? So it was God and also your willingness. So it was you, because there are many people that need help, and God or spirit, universe shows up and they don't take it.
Mm-hmm.
So you consciously took it, right? You consciously, or maybe unconsciously, took it, but you were willing.
I was.
You were willing.
Yeah, suddenly. I was suddenly willing.
Mm-hmm.
Suddenly, some people refer to the gift of desperation. I never quite felt like I received that gift, but I can tell you that I was certainly spiritually bankrupt, to use another common phrase amongst my friends. Certainly spiritually bankrupt, and then suddenly willing, and then eventually I made a choice.
Okay, so I'm going to keep poking you.
Please.
Because I appreciate your candid sharing. I love it. So, spiritually bankrupt. For those of us who don't know what that means, I don't want to assume, even I don't want to assume what that means. Please share. What does that mean for you?
For me, okay. For me, and only for me, spiritually bankrupt means or meant that I was waking up in the morning, dreading leaving, dreading going to my job, sometimes crying on the way to work, not wanting to be there, watching the clock, suddenly experiencing a lot of anxiety, making some really poor personal choices, always worried about when I was going to be able to numb again, spending my real and intangible resources on that getting numb, spending all my time alone, making promises and not keeping them, bailing out, ducking out on my family, not answering the phone, not answering the door, not paying my bills, all while being very educated and very fortunate to have had a good job at the time. I was not particularly physically unhealthy or in danger, but probably getting there, not experiencing any legal troubles, more financial troubles. Some of those might have eventually turned into legal troubles, but I was taking a lot of chances. I was not taking care of myself. I was probably 40 pounds lighter than I am now. I was choosing to smoke a lot of weed instead of eating. It had become a meal replacement for me. So there were a number of these kinds of things going on. And I didn't like who I saw in the mirror. And I'm not sure I knew who I was looking at in the mirror anymore. And I had all these ideas and all these dreams and all these things I wanted to do and wanted to become until I lit up and isolated, right? Sort of, and they're isolated, right? Today I make a choice to isolate because it makes sense to, and I'm not completely isolated. I have company at home, but back then it was a sad, desperate state of affairs. And while I grew up with religion, I didn't have a relationship with a higher power. And now I do, and I know the difference because I saw the dark, and I lived in the dark. Now I don't have to. Now I live in the sunshine.
Thank you. So if I'm understanding what you said, I'm connecting to what you said, spiritually bankrupt is about not feeling connected to something beyond yourself. A higher power, God.
Yes, but I would also describe it as a feeling of dying inside, even though I can't and won't tell you I was, in any real danger of, I wasn't actively trying to end my own life, let's say. I was not by any means actively trying to do that, but the way I was living was doing it to me inside.
It sounds like it was a slow death.
Yes, I would say that now. Yes.
Yeah. So from there, just trying to help people understand the shift and how this sometimes happens to us, right? So your story, I suspect people that are listening are resonating with aspects of it, some of it, all of it, parts of it in some way, or if nothing else, the feeling of feeling like inside we're slowly dying. Mm-hmm. So it sounds like the process was recognizing that, or not even recognizing that, being in that way of being. And then this willingness, this shift that happened, it sounds like you said it was the universe, and then a willingness. So something happened between the waking up and feeling that and living like that and a willingness to then make a choice.
I will tell you how that last day went. I spent a night at a buddy, and I have to do this to make sense of that, of the answer to that question. I spent the night with a buddy. I spent the night with a buddy. We got really high. Before I left his house the next morning, I made sure to take some of his stuff when he wasn't looking. I went home. I got in the bathtub. I called out of work, smoked what I took, smoked again, got in the car, went to visit my sister, had every intention of smoking again that night, but instead left her house and went to a facility that I thought could help me. And when they couldn't help me that night and told me to come back in a couple of days, I went back to my sister's with no intentions of smoking. Now, for me, it was smoking. For me, it wasn't, I don't drink anymore because I don't know how to intelligently. But my issue, I always forget that word. My issue, expressed itself by means of smoking all the time. Mm-hmm. Taking something that could have been a little fun here and there and just getting absolutely caught up in it. And for some reason, when I went back to my sister's that night, it wasn't an option. Mm-hmm. And it could very well have something to do with the fact that when I went back to her house that night and everybody else was going to bed, my nephew came out of his room, which was at the time very uncommon because was a teenager at the time, came out of his room and asked me if I was still watching wrestling. And when I told him I was, we put some on, and that spoke to me. I haven't looked back since. Wow.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing that. So, and then the willingness to show up and the choice to stay with it, right? Because that's also part of the process. We can, accept the support or the help and recognize that's what's required. But tell us a little bit about choice. At the time, was it a daily choice? Is it now a lifestyle? Like, tell us a little bit about, especially and I just want to give this a little context because, you're using your life story, and I appreciate that you sharing so personally about it being, weed. And for some people, they have those experiences and it's other things, right? It's other addictions. It's work addictions or other drug or alcohol addictions or sex addictions or spending money or however we numb out in life, not dealing, right? Sometimes it's just not dealing with paying the bills, whether we have the money or not. So I want to make sure that we expand this too, because especially in light of what's happening right now in the environment with, people's job situations changing very quickly and the financial stress and just the stress in general that we're all feeling, the choice to continue to show up, the choice to continue to live in that way. Talk to me a little bit more about that, however you want.
Okay. So, and I'd like to connect the dots from then to now. I'm trying to, but I think it's necessary to, again, to point out that I sought a little bit of help. They explained to me what kind of help was available. I had already previously been exposed to a 12-step program someone wanted me to consider a couple of years prior. So I did make a choice that when help explained to me they could be available 3 nights a week, I was probably going to need more than that. So I pursued that 12-step program again to fill in the blanks between sessions with well, let me try and do a better job of that. I sought help at a facility. They were available to me 3 nights a week. I knew I was going to need more than that. I pursued the 12-step program I had previously been introduced to fill in those blanks. And then at some point very early on realized that every day I was going to have to do something to stay on that track. So very early on, it was 3 nights a week at the facility, if possible, 5 meetings a week. And then I spent my weekends back upstate with my sister and her kids, and that was very helpful to me. Eventually, along the way, I learned how to pray and how to begin opening myself up to sharing with and counting on the people I was meeting at these meetings, right? So eventually I did have choices to make. And while I can now say, by the grace of God, I am sober for 5 years, I still very much have to be aware of certain things every day. And for me, some of those include prayer. And prayer is a huge one for me because I'm not a great meditator yet. I can meditate when I float, and we'll get back to that, but I'm not a great meditator yet. Prayer is huge for me. Meetings are very important to me, but if I'm being honest, I'm way behind on meetings right now. And I can say that is a result of some tangible changes, such as not having a car at the moment, commuting by train, having moved recently, my schedule being a little different than it was. I can say all that, but it's no excuse because 5 minutes down the hill here is a meeting that I haven't made a good enough effort to get to. But the tools are there. I have to be aware of them. I have to start my day in conversation with my higher power. I have to end my day there, and I have to try to connect with it as often as possible during the day. I have to try to be available to others like myself as much as possible and strive to be of service. And I'm not of enough service right now, but I also don't beat myself up all the time like I used to. I'm never going to be perfect, but I'm certainly not the piece of crap I used to think I was, right? And not that I necessarily really thought I was a piece of crap, but my measuring stick was funky. It was skewed, So if I was setting these goals, it would be impossible for me to reach without an action plan and didn't reach them, I'd beat myself up. But that's not practical. That's not helpful. That doesn't make sense on any level. So there's a lot of stuff I don't do to myself anymore, which sometimes has to be enough on those days when I'm not proactively doing enough. There are other things I no longer do that were harmful.
Wow. Lots of good information.
I don't even know.
Shared.
I'm not really even sure I'm answering your questions.
You're moving in the direction that I am wanting to, because I feel like with the timing of this podcast and with what's happening right now in the world, and people are really panicking and they're afraid. And sometimes I think people don't know how to ask for support. And everything I just heard you say in the last few minutes was about you receiving support, your recognition that you needed it, your recognition that you needed more than what was offered to you. So you were able to find that, right? You were able to choose and continue to choose 5 years later to have support in your life. And you also recognize that some days it's not going to be perfect. And it's not about beating yourself up when it's not perfect. It's about saying, okay, look at that.
Mm-hmm.
So everything you shared is so applicable to what's going on in our lives right now, because look, the reality is we all need support right now. Some of us need financial support. Some of us need emotional, physical, mental. Some of us need all of it. So it's important. And part of my intention in having you share so deeply is to help people feel less alone,
Mm-hmm.
to be real with the struggles, whatever those struggles are, fill in the blank. Okay. Weed is one thing. We've talked about others. So it's important that we encourage our listeners and then the people that they share this with, that now is the time to make the choice to get the support you need. It's the time for those of us who are in a position to give, however we're able to give, to ask who needs support, and also to receive, right? Like, so for me, right, I own a business in wellness. People look to me for support. Well, I'm also struggling because we have a business that's not operating right now. So I'm heartbroken and devastated and stressed out. And I've never experienced anything like this. And yet I know that I want to be a stand. And I also know that I need others to be a stand for me. So I feel like this is a perfect time for you to share your journey, and a perfect opportunity for you to also share maybe with the listeners as they navigate this gap right now, which we're not sure how long it's going to last. We're not sure. We can speculate what's going to be the fallout, et cetera, et cetera. But maybe you can share a few of the actual things you've learned. So either concepts or practices that you have learned through your journey over the 5 years that really can help people stay in the present moment and stay in choice of living.
I will try. I'll repeat the first one again. For me, it's prayer. I do believe that prayer can have many names, just like God can have many names. So I don't want to turn anybody off by talking about this. You know, for me today, spirituality is not about religion. So I think whatever one does, scientific prayer, meditation, breathing exercises, visualizing, the law of attraction, whatever you call it, I think it's important for us each to have a practice like it. If you feel spiritual doing yoga, do it. If you feel spiritual sitting out on the balcony and listening to the breeze, or sitting by the water and listening to the waves, do it. So for me, the prayer concept is huge. What else can I put a finger on? Again, fellowship and service. Maybe there are two things. I'm going to call them one because I don't want to take any shortcuts. So it's important to be connected. We really, the humans are capable of great things, but capable of greater things in communion. So I do believe that we are all better off with in fellowship. We're all better off working together. I believe there is spirituality there. So for those who don't like the word spirituality, here's another definition. It occurs when you commune with others. It doesn't have to be about you and something in the sky. It doesn't have to be about you and the God you were raised with. Spirituality very much can occur when people come together. Now, we can't come together right now, so there are other things available. I'm going to be listening to a lot of podcasts this week. I enjoy working on yours and mine. I'm going to be doing live events on Facebook for my podcast. I am continuing to make myself available to some of my clients from work who are also at home right now, or not working, or feeling, the stress and the fear and the anxiety. So prayer, fellowship, and being of service. Let's add to that list that I'm no longer, and again, no judgment zone here, to each their own. I no longer drink, smoke, numb. I no longer do that. Thank God. Because the moment my boss told me on Tuesday that I was going home for 2 weeks and that he owed me a few dollars and I could take some of it from petty cash, the first thing I would have done was lined up something to party with that night. And my first concern would have been, am I going to be able to get through these 2 weeks? Am I going to be able to reach that guy who brings me my stuff? Am I going to be able to get high for these 2 weeks? That would have been it. I would have still been in this onesie. I would have still looked like I hadn't showered today and hadn't shaved. But I would be high out of my mind. You and I wouldn't be talking right now. I would have made the appointment with you, but I wouldn't have kept it. You name it, it would have been a completely different ball game. And I would have been more concerned with that than anything else. And today, I'm not worried about, and call me crazy and call me fortunate, or call me, on the privileged side of some of these political and socioeconomic things we all talk about in the news all the time. Today, I'm not worried. And because I'm not worried, because I have faith, I don't need to escape. I need to be me, and connected to me, and connected to people I care about, and pursuing things that make me feel alive rather than that make me feel, numb. So prayer, fellowship, service, you've got to be, and this comes with time, you've got to be, open-minded and willing, and you've got to be honest with yourself. And now, now you want 3 or 4 bullet points, and now I'm talking program, but eventually all of this stuff sounds, at first it sounds like, yeah, right. We got a lot of slogans and I can't identify with any of them. Easy for you to say, but eventually all of these slogans and these concepts, at least for me, prove themselves to be true and effective, and they all work. So change a little something today, just a little something, and keep trying to change that little something. And when you're ready, take on a little bit more, but not by yourself. Do it with someone like yourself who can coach you along when it's time to up the weights on the bar, when it's time to push a little harder. And we're offering something like this at the Float Center, even though we're temporarily closed. We're offering a program that was designed to get people floating for stress relief, but is turning into more of a community thing where they're telling us about their problems and telling us that they haven't been able to fix them in the past because they didn't have accountability or someone coaching them along. And now, because I can take their call on my computer, I'm able to offer a little something and be that accountability coach.
Beautiful. So you shared several things, and I'm going to do a little bullet point, if you will. So the first thing, when you were talking about prayer, and then you gave a lot of other examples of things, is I think it's finding the thing, right? And you said some of it, like, is it walking by the water? Is it listening to music? Is it meditation? Whatever that practice is, a daily ritual, like a bookend. I think of it as a bookend. Is it writing? Is it silence? So having some sort of some actual anchor, physical practice that we participate in is very important. The second thing, you said a few different words. You said fellowship and service. I heard a lot. I kept hearing community, connection. So And we are able to do that virtually, which we're so blessed that we can see each other, right? And when we do FaceTime and we do these Zoom meetings and such, because I do think that it is important, as I said before, to have that connection and to have that community and to be participating, because that's what we always as humans crave. And in situations like this, I think it brings it up to the spotlight, right? And then the third thing I want to say is, these are my bullets, not yours. So thank you for giving me creative permission and authorship. Is you said something very profound, and you said, I decided I didn't have to or want to go numb. Wow.
Mm.
I acknowledge you for that, because that transition and that transformation is incredible. To be able to sit and say, I choose not to go numb, because I don't have to, because I'm connected to myself now, because of you're doing all these practices. So I'm saying this emphatically, because there is no magic pill. It takes work. It takes work to move ourselves from where we are to where we want to go. And it doesn't mean we even have to have a problem, right? So those of us who are high performing individuals, and maybe we've lived a life where we haven't had a lot of struggle, and we've been fortunate to have success, and maybe we haven't had addictions, we still are human. And we still, when we want to achieve things in our life, have to take ourselves from where we are to where we want to go. And I don't know any successful person who is able to do that without having a solid grounding practice, without having community and fellowship and enrollment and support, right? Mm-hmm. And having the choice to say, this is what I choose. I choose to live. I choose to be present. So powerful in all of your sharing. And I want us to wrap up with really landing some of these concepts and this heartfelt sharing with, how can people use this here, now, today, and what we're facing? And the one word I've been itching to say is surrender.
Well, there's power in surrender. I'll never forget the first time I shared at a meeting that the surrendering team or the surrendering nation goes on to fight another day, as if I was the one who came up with that metaphor. There's a lot of power in surrender. And while you're talking about that, I'm thinking to myself that, division is an ego thing. Division is man-made. The spirit that I believe we are spiritual beings in human form, right? Rather than, human beings trying to blah, blah, blah. So the spirit, the creative force of the universe yearns to create and to join and to be, as you've said, to be in the being. We get sucked into the doing and the ego. And so division to me, be it from yourself or from society or from the people who are on the other side of the aisle or the other side of town, all that stuff is man-made and ego-made. And the sooner we stop to think that ultimately we are one. I've heard you say it on the show. It's how I usually end the episodes on my podcast. Is like the silliest, most vulgar thing. No, not really. But I end the episodes with, don't forget, if you can hear my voice right now, then we are one. I believe that deep down. I used to be a conspiracy theory guy and F the system and listen, to some degree, all of these points of view are valid in some way. Today, I'm not concerned with being, oh boy. Someone once said to me that, excuse me. Someone once said to me that growing up, their idea of courage was, and I know I'm going to screw this up, their idea of courage was getting into the fight even though they knew they'd lose. And I think today, perhaps, courage means to me not getting into the fight.
It's
Good.
something, what I keep intuiting is it's not about being right. When we have points of view and ego is involved and there's divisiveness, we are so invested in, and I've talked about this on podcasts, we're so invested in being right. But when we're right, someone else is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So we realize we don't want to be right because that's divisive.
Yeah, right. I agree. And there's another one. Would you rather be right or happy? And, my go-to sometimes is to want to be right, but I almost always know immediately after that it was not the right choice. And I'm working on that. So just surrender to, you have to surrender to making the small changes. You have to surrender to opening your eyes. That's all it has to be at first. You said it. There is no magic pill. It's not all going to change overnight, but we have to be willing to put that desire to be right, or that desire to appear strong, or that desire to appear as though nothing phases us, the desire to appear as though we've got what the next guy has and we're keeping up with the Joneses. We have to be willing to really stop and think about how different we all are. Not unique and blessed, perhaps, but different, not really. So
what do we all want? I'm bringing you back. So if we're not different at the core, we all want to be loved.
Mm-hmm.
We all want to love. We all want to feel connection. We all want to feel safe. And secure,
mm-hmm.
and stable,
mm-hmm.
and seen and heard. Especially now, we want to feel safe. We want to feel secure. So when I bring up surrender, I bring it up because a lot of us are in resistance to what is happening right now. And I think a lot of the resistance is a result of simply being afraid, and things are happening so quickly,
mm-hmm.
right? It's drastic. I've seen my business go from a busy day to zero.
Mm-hmm.
It's incredibly disturbing and alarming and frightening. I've
mm-hmm.
never seen anything like it. And I'm not the only one. I can
mm-hmm.
only speak about my experience. So this surrender is a powerful practice because I almost feel like it is the doorway and the portal to the transformation. Because once we realize this is what is, I accept. I might not like it. And I've talked about this before on other episodes on resistance. I might not like it. I don't have to like it. I may wish the future to be different. However, I surrender to what is. I accept what is, because in the surrender, the energy of resistance is now freed up, because we expend a lot of energy on resistance. So that energy leak and vortex is freed up so that we can come back to ourself, and we can have the energy to have a creative response, and we have the energy and ability to access the infinite possibilities. So ultimately, we will look back on this coronavirus and we will say, wow, look at all of the positives that came out of it. Look at the evolution of humanity. Look at how we now take care of each other, how we're more compassionate, whatever. The list will go on and on. But in it right now, so many of us are in that very primal survival mode. What am I going to do? What's going to happen? I lost my job. Where am I going to live? I mean, it's very, very quickly we go into that fear mode. And I want to be able to end by really bringing this point home, because even though you didn't say it, Rich, it feels like there was a surrender in the process when you made the decision, consciously or unconsciously, to stay at your sister's that night, and then to get the help, and then to stay with it. There was a surrender of some sort, of some fight, internal battle, of a surrender of, yeah, I do feel the void. Yeah, I am slowly dying. Now what?
Mm-hmm.
So when we can say, yeah, I'm terrified of what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen. And I can go, then I can go, okay, now where do I want to focus? Oh, I want to use this. As many people we've seen on social, they're using it to, journal and start new practices. And some people are not fortunate to be able to do that. Okay. Or they're still so much in fear mode. And I respect and honor and acknowledge that, because it's not all peachy cream. Okay. We're not all of us are sitting home watching Netflix.
Mm-hmm.
Some of us are worried if we're going to have a home and pay cable. So this aspect of surrender gives us the ability to accept what is, and then gives us the energy to start then saying, what do I want to focus on now? And what do I want to do about it now? And what's the world I want to create now, right here now, not when this virus is done and cured and we're on to, what do I want to do right now? How can I be in the prosperity mindset right now? And that's my offering. And that's part of why I'm so excited that you were able to join today, because you're a powerful story and you're a powerful person and you're real. So thank you for your deep sharing and for your commitment to your life.
Yes.
Because you are going to help, other people. Because you committed to your life. You committed to saying, I choose to live. I choose to live, and I choose to be present, and I choose not to numb out. I choose to face it. I choose to face the dark. And to know that that's where the wound is, where the light enters. That's Rumi.
Mm-hmm.
So in closing, in wrapping up, anything else that you want to share or say regarding your journey, regarding giving people maybe some final words of wisdom and support right now, some nourishment, sustenance?
Well, I think you just gave the moral of the story. Perhaps my commitment to myself and to working on myself could have a ripple effect of helping someone else, either listening to this podcast or at a meeting or what have you. The same way that our choices to be home right now could have the ripple effect of X number of fewer people getting sick this week, right? So there is definitely a relationship between those choices and the impact one might have on the world or universe around them. I truly believe that. I certainly would be happy to make myself available to anyone who wants to continue this conversation and perhaps explore some of the things we spoke about in terms of having a virtual. I know you guys are offering some virtual services. Rise Above Flotation in Mount Kisco is also offering some virtual services at the moment, and I can be reached via the Stress Release Program. For those who are interested or who just want to chat about this episode at 914-825-4927. But I think the important thing for me right now is you help me realize I no longer am afraid. And that's not something that I can tell someone else not to be unless I tell them every day and they take some small action and get there themselves. But I no longer am afraid. And so I am that much more prepared and ready to make a difference with this time. And I think you're right. Now is the time, while stuff, I almost said the other word, while stuff seems scary, now is the time to learn that what we give, we will get back. And there is ultimately little to be worried about as long as we each stay healthy.
That's a wrap.
Right.
Good stuff, my friend. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's go.
If you find this podcast helpful and if it provokes you in any way, meaning you love what I have to say, or maybe you don't like it because it triggers you, awesome. I've moved something in you, and perhaps you will want to share this with someone else in your life who might be interested in being moved. So you can find us on Apple, on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts. And as always, feel free to share links with people you love, because remember, we are in relationship with each other. So the more that you are present and you invite other people on the journey, the more peaceful world we will live in, because we will be together understanding these concepts. So I thank you for your support, and you help us keep the show going by sharing it, by liking it, by giving us reviews, and helping us to grow. Thank you.